Hey everyone, it's Joy here for Honeybee Stamps, and today I created a fun fall card using the Lovely Layers Sunflowers and the Burlap 3D embossing folder. I've die cut all of my images from white cardstock, and we're going to start by ink blending our 3 layers to our sunflower. The first color I'm starting with is Aged Mahogany, and all the colors that I'm using are Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to be using 2 colors per flower, but you're going to see how I do that here in just a little bit. Now, I did talk about using the Burlap 3D embossing folder. We're going to give these flowers some really awesome texture. So definitely hang on in the video to see that because I think you're really going to love it. My next color that I'm going to be using is Scattered Straw. Basically, I'm using the lighter color out of the 2 color combinations for each of the flowers. So I'm not going to add the second color until a little bit later after we use the embossing folder, and you'll see why we're going to use that second color. I'm also ink blending lightly. I am not worried if it gets a full coverage. I actually like if it's darker in some areas than others because I think that adds a little bit of interest. Now for our third sunflower, I'm going to be using Fossilized Amber. And you can see here an example of not ink blending it perfectly. You can see that there's darker areas and lighter areas. And again, I do really like that because it's going to give it more interest. Now that those are done, I am going to start embossing my flowers. Now, these die cuts already have embossed lines in them, so this is going to kind of take away those lines, but it's going to add all of this fun burlap texture, and wasn't that so pretty? This is going to give these flowers the look of fabric, which I think is really, really pretty. And once all of the techniques are done, I just think they turned out so stunning. So let's finish these last few layers of our flowers. I'm also going to do the same thing for the leaves and for part of the centers of the flowers. I'm using Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink for my leaves. I only end up using 2 of these, but I always end up die cutting more than I need. Then we have the centers of the flowers. I'm gonna ink blend those in Scorched Timber. This is the centerpiece. There is a piece that goes on top of this. I'm going to go lighter on this piece because this is what I'm going to put in the embossing folder. These 3 pieces here, I'm going to ink blend darker, and I'm not going to put those in the embossing folder. So let's add our leaves and our centers to that Burlap 3D folder. Run those through the die cut machine, and then that's going to give us that nice texture. Now on the Aged Mahogany flowers, I am going to take Seedless Preserves, and I'm very lightly and in different directions just letting the ink grab all of that texture from the 3D embossing folder. So this is going to highlight that burlap look, and having the 2 different colors I just think makes this look so fun. I love the color combinations. These are some of the color combinations I used in last week's video, but obviously I'm using them a bit differently. So this is Fossilized Amber on top of the Scattered Straw that we already ink blended. Isn't that pretty? And the last one is going to be Rusty Hinge on top of Fossilized Amber. So again, just going in the different directions. That way I can catch all of that texture from that folder. Let's finish up this last one. And then for the centers, I am using only 1 color. I'm using the Scorched Timber again. I did use this to ink blend, but I'm also using it to catch all of that texture. And the same thing for the leaves. I'm just going to use the Rustic Wilderness, which is why I did ink blend it a bit lighter. So now we have all of our ink highlighting all of that fabulous texture. On my A2 size background, I have an acrylic block. I am going to be using the darker colors. So I am starting with Fossilized Amber. I spritz that with my Distress sprayer, and I'm just going to drag it across one section of my card panel. Again, this is A2 sized. I'm going to do 3 colors: Fossilized Amber, Rusty Hinge, and Seedless Preserves. So here's that rusty hinge, pushing it down, pushing the ink onto my acrylic block, spritzing it with my distress sprayer, and dragging it across my paper. I am going to dry these two because I don't want the Seedless Preserves to mix with it. I want it to just overlap. So I'm going to add that right to the center. Now let's glue our flowers together. It's kind of hard to see where these line up because there is so much texture. So I do already have them lined up together and stacked, but when you guys have these, you should have a layering guide, and it really is easy to get these lined up. So I'm just going to adhere down my 3 layers. Then we can add the centers to our flowers, and once you add the centers, they look so beautiful and finished. Then you can really get an idea of what these are supposed to look like. Let's layer our 2 center pieces. And I'm just going to put them under an acrylic block until that liquid glue dries. And then once these are adhered, we can adhere these to the centers of our flowers. And then I'm going to stamp my sentiment using the Misty from the Blessings of Fall stamp set. It says fall is my favorite color. I'm going to stamp that with intense black ink on white cardstock. And of course, I'm going to be using the coordinating die to die cut out my sentiment. So I'm going to tape that in place, and then I can run that through my die cut machine. Now I'm going to use liquid glue on the 2 outside flowers. I am laying down the flowers with their coordinating darker colors. Then the center flower is going to have a little bit of foam tape. I did want this to have some dimension. And I'm going to also add a little bit of liquid glue. That way it really, really holds down. Of course, some foam adhesive behind my sentiment because I'd love that to have some dimension. And then I'm going to place that at the bottom. And this is adhered to a white A2 size card base. I don't trim off any of the leaves or the petals. I like it like this, but you could trim all the excess off and it would still look just as beautiful. But I think just get a bigger envelope and shove this card in it and send it off. Let's tuck those leaves in there. Then I'm going to be using Fall is in the Air gem stickers, and I'm using ones that kind of match the flowers. So there was a lighter yellow, there is kind of this light orange, and then a little bit of a purple one for that center flower. And this just adds a little something extra, a little bit of shine to this, which I think is really pretty. Let's take a look at this up close. Look at those flowers and all of that texture from the embossing folder, and then the ink just highlights that. I think this just turned out so, so lovely. And I want to thank you guys so very much for stopping by and watching. I hope that you enjoyed this project, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.